I'll never forget the look on Derek's face when I answered him in perfect French. We were sitting around the Christmas table at my daughter's house. The whole family gathered, and I just handed him a bottle of wine from my late wife's collection. He held it up to the light, smirked at his brother, and said in French, "Look at this cheap garbage the old man brought. Probably got it at a gas station. My father-in-law is such a pathetic cheapskate." They both laughed. I let the moment hang there, watching them enjoy their little joke. Then I smiled and replied, also in French, "Actually, that bottle is worth $3,000. My late wife and I bought it in Bordeaux on our honeymoon." The color drained from his face. The entire room went silent. The moment stretched out like taffy, everyone frozen, forks halfway to mouths, glasses suspended in midair. My daughter Sarah looked between us, confused by the sudden tension but unable to understand what had just been said. Derek's brother, a stocky man named Carl who worked with Derek in real estate, cleared his throat and tried to laugh it off. He said something about how they were just kidding around, but his voice cracked on the last word. Derek recovered faster than I expected. That should have been my first warning. Instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a shred of embarrassment, he threw his head back and laughed. A big, booming laugh that sounded completely false to my ears. "Come on, Courtney," he said, switching to English and spreading his hands wide like he was the victim here. "It was just a joke. Can't you take a joke? I mean, seriously, you've been hiding that you speak French this whole time? That's pretty sneaky if you ask me." Sarah touched his arm. "Derek, that's not fair, isn't it?" He looked around the table, playing to the crowd. "Your dad sits there all quiet, letting people talk around him, and the whole time he understands everything? That's weird, Sarah. You have to admit that's weird." I wanted to explain that I'd never hidden anything. My wife Marie and I had lived in Paris for 8 years while I taught at the university there. We spoke French at home, in private, as our own special language. After she died 3 years ago, I simply hadn't had reason to use it. But Derek was already reshaping the narrative, turning my moment of standing up for myself into evidence of some character flaw. The dinner ended awkwardly. People made excuses and left earlier than planned. As I gathered my coat, Derek cornered me in the kitchen. Sarah was upstairs putting away gifts. We were alone. "Let me make something very clear," he said, his voice low and cold. All pretense of friendliness had evaporated. "You embarrassed me in front of my family, in front of my brother. That was a mistake. You insulted me first," I said, keeping my voice steady, "in what you thought was a language I couldn't understand. And now everyone thinks I'm some kind of jerk." He stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Sarah tomorrow and apologize for making tonight weird. You're going to tell her you overreacted." "I'm not going to do that." His smile was thin and sharp. "Then Sarah and I are going to have a very long talk about boundaries, about how her father doesn't respect her marriage, about how maybe it's time to create some distance." He paused, watching my face. "I know you've been sending her money, by the way. Those checks you mail every month? I intercept them. She has no idea you've been trying to help. As far as Sarah knows, you stopped caring after Marie died." The words hit me like a physical blow. For 6 months, I'd been sending my daughter $500 a month to help with their mortgage. Young couples struggle, I knew that. I wanted to help without making a big deal of it. And this whole time, Derek had been stealing from both of us. "That's my money," I said. "That's for Sarah. That's my wife," Derek countered. "What's hers is mine. And right now, she thinks you've abandoned her. She's hurt, Courtney. She's been hurt for months. One word from me and that hurt turns into something else. Something permanent." He walked past me, patting my shoulder like we'd just had a friendly chat. "Thanks for the wine," he called back. "I'm sure it'll taste great. Merry Christmas." I stood in that kitchen for a long time after he left, my hands shaking, understanding for the first time that I wasn't dealing with just an arrogant son-in-law. I was dealing with someone calculating and cruel, someone who had been systematically cutting Sarah off from me, using my own love for her as a weapon. I drove home through streets decorated with Christmas lights, past houses full of families, and felt more alone than I had since Marie's funeral. The silence started 2 days after Christmas. I called Sarah's cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. I tried the house line and got a generic message. I sent a text asking if she was okay, and it showed as delivered but never read. On the third day, I drove to their house in the suburbs, a neat craftsman-style place with a for sale sign that hadn't been there at Christmas. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. I could see movement through the front window, shadows passing behind the curtains. I knocked again, called out that it was just me, that I wanted to talk. Nothing. Finally, a neighbor came out, an older woman walking her small dog. She told me that Sarah and Derek were showing the house to buyers and couldn't be disturbed. The way she said it, formal and rehearsed, made me think Derek had prepared her with that line. I left, but the wrongness of it gnawed at me. Sarah and I had always been close. Even after Marie died and grief made me distant for those first hard months, we'd maintained our bond. We talked 3 times a week. We had lunch every Sunday. That's when I'd started sending the money, wanting to help her build a life, wanting to be useful when I felt so useless in every other way. The explanation came via email from my brother-in-law Paul, Marie's younger brother who lived 2 hours north. The email was curt. Sarah told us what you did. Pretending not to speak French all these years so you could spy on people? That's low, Courtney. That's really low. Don't contact Linda or me until you're ready to come clean about why you deceived everyone. I read it 3 times, trying to understand. Spy on people? I'd never spied on anyone. I'd simply lived my life. French was the language of my marriage, of my years abroad, of my career. It wasn't a secret. It just wasn't something that came up in everyday conversation. I called Paul. He didn't answer. I called Linda, Marie's sister, who had been like a second mother to Sarah after Marie passed. She picked up, but her voice was ice. Linda, what is happening? What did Derek tell you? Derek didn't tell us anything. Sarah did. She's devastated, Courtney. She said you admitted to understanding French all along, that you've been listening to private conversations. Derek's brother speaks French, apparently. They've been having private discussions, and you just sat there pretending not to understand. That happened once, at Christmas. I responded because Derek insulted me. So you admit you were eavesdropping. I was sitting at the same table. He was talking about me. Linda sighed, a sound full of disappointment. Why didn't you ever tell anyone you spoke French? In all these years? Because it never mattered. Because it was just part of my life with Marie. Because I didn't think I needed to announce every skill or experience I have. Well, it matters now. It makes you look secretive, deceptive. She paused. Derek showed us pictures, Courtney. Pictures of you in Paris from before Marie died. You looked different, younger, but also like a different person. He said you've been lying about your past. Those are pictures from when Marie and I lived there. When I taught at the university. There's nothing secret about that. Then why doesn't Sarah remember any of this? The question stopped me cold. Sarah had been young when Marie and I were in Paris, only 5 years old. We'd returned to the States when she was 6, and by the time she was old enough to understand or remember clearly, it had become just another chapter of her parents' past. I'd shown her pictures. We'd talked about it, but maybe not recently. Maybe not since Marie died and it became too painful to revisit those memories. Derek had found a crack and wedged it wide open. I tried explaining this to Linda, but I could hear in her voice that she'd already made up her mind. Derek had gotten to her first, shaped the story, and now everything I said sounded like excuses. Over the next week, the isolation deepened. Sarah's cousin Brad, who I'd helped put through college with a loan I'd never asked him to repay, sent me a brief text saying he needed space to process everything. Marie's friends from her book club, women I'd known for decades, stopped returning calls. Someone, and I knew it had to be Derek, had been making calls of his own, spreading a version of events where I was the villain. I finally reached Sarah on a Thursday morning. She answered her cell phone, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she realized who it was. "Sweetheart," I said, and my voice cracked on the word. "Please talk to me. Please tell me what I did wrong." "You lied, Dad." Her voice was small and hurt. "My whole life, you lied. I never lied to you. Not once. You spoke French and never told me. You had this whole secret past, and I had to learn about it from Derek. He had to show me pictures, had to explain where you really were all those years. Do you know how that feels? Sarah, I was with your mother. You were there too, at least for the early years. We lived in Paris together as a family. I don't remember that. You were very young. Exactly. So I have to take your word for it. And right now, I don't know if I can trust your word. The unfairness of it nearly choked me. Derek stole from you, I said, abandoning caution. The money I've been sending. He's been intercepting it. Silence on the line. Then, that's a horrible thing to say about my husband. It's true. You're jealous. Derek said you would be. He said you never liked him, that you'd try to turn me against him. Sarah, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking. I need space, Dad. I need time to figure out what's real. Her voice broke. I thought I knew you. Now I don't know anything. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the wall of my living room where pictures of Sarah at every age smiled back at me. In half of them, Marie stood beside her, both of them radiant and alive. I'd lost Marie to cancer. I couldn't lose Sarah too, but I was losing her. Derek had made sure of that. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late January. I'd spent the previous 4 weeks in a kind of fog, going through motions, eating because I had to, sleeping in fits and starts. The house felt enormous and empty. Every room held memories of Marie, and now every silence reminded me that Sarah wasn't calling. Derek's voice on the phone was smooth, almost friendly. Courtney, how are you holding up? I should have hung up. Every instinct screamed at me to end the call. Instead, I said, "What do you want?" To apologize. I've been thinking about everything that happened at Christmas, and I realize I overreacted. I was embarrassed, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. The words were right, but the tone was wrong. Too practiced, too smooth. Is Sarah there? I asked. Can I talk to her? She's at work. But that's actually why I'm calling. I want to make this right, Courtney. I want to fix things between us. For Sarah's sake, you know? She's been miserable. Then, let me talk to her. I will. I promise. But first, I need your help with something. A business opportunity. He paused. Hear me out before you say no. I know you're probably thinking this is weird, me calling about business after everything. But this is how I want to make amends. I want to include you in something that's going to be very profitable, something that will prove I trust you. He went on to explain a real estate development deal, a strip mall in a growing suburb, anchor tenants already lined up, guaranteed returns. He needed investors to close the deal, and he was offering me a chance to get in on the ground floor. Invest $50,000, and in 6 months, I'd see returns of at least 20%. More importantly, it would show Sarah that Derek and I could work together. It would be the bridge back to my daughter. I don't have that kind of money lying around, I said, which wasn't entirely true. I had retirement savings, but they were meant to last me the rest of my life. Think about it, Derek said. Talk to your financial advisor. Look at the documents I'll send over. This is legitimate, Courtney. I've got 3 other investors already committed. I'm offering you this because I want Sarah to see that we're family. That family takes care of family. The documents arrived by email within an hour. They looked professional. An LLC registered in Delaware, property surveys, tenant agreements with recognizable national chains, profit projections that seemed conservative and realistic. There was even a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of, certifying the legitimacy of the deal. I spent 3 days researching. I looked up the property address and found it on Google Maps, a vacant lot in a suburb 40 minutes away. I looked up the LLC and found it registered with the state. I even drove out to see the property myself. And sure enough, there was a construction sign announcing the development, complete with a rendering of what it would look like when finished. Derek called me every day, answering my questions patiently, providing more documentation. He sent me a video of the construction site with him standing in front of it, explaining the timeline. He sounded knowledgeable and passionate, and he dangled Sarah like a carrot. She asked about you yesterday, he'd say. Or, she saw your name on the investor list and smiled for the first time in weeks. I wanted to believe him. No, I needed to believe him. The isolation had worn me down to nothing. I hadn't seen Sarah in over a month. I hadn't held my daughter, or heard her laugh, or shared a meal with her. The silence was killing me slowly, and Derek was offering a way out. I withdrew $50,000 from my retirement account. The financial advisor tried to talk me out of it, warned me about the risks of private investments, but I'd made up my mind. I transferred the money to the LLC account Derek had provided. He sent me a certificate of investment, more paperwork, a welcome packet. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. Derek sent regular updates. The permits were approved. The construction was ahead of schedule. One tenant had signed early. Sarah had agreed to have dinner with me once the first phase was complete, as a celebration of the partnership. Then the updates stopped. I called Derek and got voicemail. I texted and got no response. After 3 days of silence, I drove to their house. The for sale sign was gone, but so was everything else. The house was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of furniture, empty of any sign that anyone had ever lived there. I peered through the windows and saw bare walls and clean carpets. The neighbor who'd told me about the house showing before came out again, this time without her dog. They moved, she said, about a week ago. Sold the place fast, didn't even have a moving truck, just packed up a U-Haul themselves and left. Did they say where they were going? She shook her head. That husband of theirs seemed in a real hurry, though. Kept looking over his shoulder like he was worried about something. I drove to the property where the development was supposed to be happening. The construction sign was gone. The lot was empty and overgrown, clearly untouched for months. There were no permits posted, no equipment, no evidence that any work had ever been planned. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone and called the law firm that had certified the documents. The number was disconnected. I searched for the LLC online again, and this time dug deeper. It had been registered only 2 months ago, just before Christmas. The address listed was a UPS store. I'd been scammed. Completely, thoroughly, professionally scammed. I drove home in a daze and went straight to my computer. I found a lawyer who specialized in fraud. He looked at everything I sent him and delivered the news I already knew in my gut. The documents were fake. The LLC was a shell. The property had never been for sale, and the development had never been approved. Derek had created an elaborate fiction, complete with fake letterheads and forged signatures. "Can I get my money back?" I asked. The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Bill Rogers, grimaced. "We can try, but if he's already moved and liquidated everything, it'll be tough. These cases are expensive to pursue, and even if you win a judgment, collecting is another matter entirely. What about criminal charges? You can file a police report. They'll investigate. But again, if he's left the state, it becomes a jurisdictional nightmare. How motivated are you to pursue this?" I thought about Sarah, about the baby she might give me someday, about the family I was losing piece by piece. "Very motivated," I said. But motivation wasn't enough. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned that Derek and Sarah had moved to North Carolina, 2 states away. I found their new address through Sarah's employer, a marketing firm that still had her listed on their website. I thought about flying there, confronting them, demanding my money and my daughter back. Instead, I called the North Carolina Police Department with jurisdiction over their new town. I filed a report. The officer who took my information was sympathetic, but non-committal. "They'd look into it," he said. These things took time. I started finding other victims online. A man in Florida who'd lost $30,000 in a similar real estate scam. A woman in Ohio who'd invested in a fake startup Derek had pitched. A couple in Maryland who'd hired Derek to flip a house and watched him disappear with their deposit. All of them had filed police reports. None of them had seen a penny returned. Derek was good at this. He'd been doing it for years, moving from state to state, using different company names, always staying just ahead of the law. And my daughter was with him, married to him, completely unaware that she'd tied herself to a professional con artist. The chest pains started on a Saturday morning in early March. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, staring at another dead end in my attempts to track down Derek. when suddenly my left arm went numb and my chest felt like someone had wrapped it in steel bands and was squeezing. The room tilted. I tried to stand and couldn't. My phone was on the counter, impossibly far away. I don't remember much of the next part. Dorothy, my neighbor, told me later that she'd been bringing over a casserole and found me on the floor. She'd called 911. The paramedics arrived within minutes. At the hospital, they ran tests. It wasn't a heart attack, the doctor told me, but a severe panic attack combined with dangerously high blood pressure. My body was reacting to months of sustained stress. If I didn't get it under control, the doctor warned, next time it might not be a false alarm. They kept me overnight for observation. I lay in the hospital bed, listening to the beeps and hums of medical equipment, feeling like a failure. I'd lost my money, lost my daughter, and now my own body was giving up on me. I was 67 years old and alone in a hospital room with no one to call, no one who would care if I lived or died. That's when I heard the nurses talking outside my door. "Did you see the pregnant woman in 214? One of them said. "Absolutely beautiful, but she looks exhausted." "How far along is she?" 5 months. "Came in for a regular checkup, but her blood pressure was concerning. We're monitoring her for a few hours." Something in me stirred. 5 months pregnant. It could be anyone, I told myself. There were probably dozens of pregnant women in this hospital right now, but I couldn't let it go. When a nurse came to check my vitals, I asked, as casually as I could, "The pregnant woman in 214. What's her name?" The nurse hesitated, clearly aware of privacy rules, but then softened at whatever she saw in my face. "Sarah Thompson," she said quietly. The world stopped. My daughter was here, in this same building, pregnant with my grandchild. 5 months along, which meant she'd been pregnant when Derek scammed me, pregnant when they fled, pregnant while I'd been desperately trying to reach her. I was going to be a grandfather, and I hadn't even known. As soon as the nurse left, I pulled out my IV and got dressed. A different nurse tried to stop me, but I signed whatever paperwork would let me discharge myself. I took the elevator up 2 floors and found the maternity ward. Through a window in a door, I saw her. Sarah sat in a chair by the window, one hand resting on her belly, staring out at nothing. She looked thin, too thin for someone 5 months pregnant. Her face was pale and drawn. Even from a distance, I could see the exhaustion in the slope of her shoulders. I pushed through the door, started toward her. "Sarah," I said, and my voice came out hoarse. She looked up, eyes widening. For just a second, I saw relief flash across her face, the instinctive response of a daughter seeing her father. Then something else took over, something guarded and frightened, and she looked away. "You can't be here," she whispered. "Sweetheart, please. Let me explain." But footsteps behind me made us both turn. Derek strode through the door, his face darkening when he saw me. He was dressed in an expensive suit, looking healthy and prosperous, everything I was not. He put himself between Sarah and me, physically blocking me from my own daughter. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "I'm in the hospital. I didn't know Sarah was here until I heard the nurses." "Sure you didn't." Derek grabbed Sarah's arm, pulled her to her feet. She winced at his grip but didn't protest. "We're leaving." "Sarah, wait." I stepped forward, and Derek stepped to meet me. We were chest to chest now, and I realized he was younger, stronger, and completely unafraid. "I need to talk to you. About the baby. About everything." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she wouldn't look at me. "Dad, you need to stop." "Stop what?" "Trying to reach you. Trying to be part of your life." Derek's laugh was cruel. "Trying to destroy our family, you mean? Did you really think you could steal from us and we'd just let it go?" The audacity of it, the sheer reversal of reality, left me speechless. "I stole from you? You invested in my company, and then claimed I scammed you. You filed police reports, tried to get me arrested, all because you're jealous that Sarah chose me over you." Derek's voice got louder, performing now for the nurses who had started to gather. "You're a bitter old man who can't accept that his daughter grew up." "That's not what happened," I said. But Derek was already pulling Sarah toward the door. I followed them to the parking lot, my legs weak, my chest aching. I called after Sarah, pleading with her to just listen, to give me 5 minutes. She turned at their car, and for a moment our eyes met. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Please, baby girl," I said. "I just want to talk to you." Sarah opened her mouth, and I swear she was about to speak, to finally break through whatever walls Derek had built. But Derek cut her off. "He stole from us, Sarah. Remember? He invested in my company, and now he's claiming we scammed him. He's trying to destroy our family before our baby is even born." Derek opened the passenger door and practically pushed her into the seat. Then he turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a restraining order being filed. If you contact us again, you'll be arrested. Stay away from my wife. Stay away from my child." They drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot, my hand pressed to my chest where the pain was blooming again. A security guard approached, asked if I was okay. I nodded, even though nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for months. I drove home on autopilot, went straight to bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling. My daughter was pregnant. I was going to be a grandfather, and unless something changed, I would never meet my grandchild. Derek would make sure of that. He'd already proven he was willing to do whatever it took to keep me away, and he had the law on his side. To everyone else, I was the problem. The bitter father who couldn't let go. I thought about giving up. I actually thought about it, lying there in the dark. What was the point? Sarah believed Derek. The family believed Derek. I had no proof, no allies, no leverage. All I had was the truth, and the truth didn't seem to matter anymore. Then I thought about Marie, about what she would say if she could see me now. She'd fought cancer for 3 years, fighting every single day even when the odds were hopeless. She'd never given up. She'd never let the darkness win. I couldn't give up either. Not when my daughter needed me, even if she didn't know it yet. 2 weeks after the hospital encounter, I was seriously considering selling my house. It was too big for one person, full of memories I could barely stand. And I needed the money to cover legal fees if I had any hope of pursuing Derek. I'd stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Dorothy brought me meals I barely touched. On a Thursday afternoon, my old colleague from the university knocked on my door. Professor Helen Martinez had been a friend to Marie and me for over 20 years. She'd taught in the Spanish department while I was in French, and we'd shared countless faculty dinners and coffee breaks. After Marie died, Helen had checked in regularly, but I'd been so caught up in the situation with Sarah that I'd stopped answering her calls. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked right in, took one look at me, and said, "Jesus, Courtney, you look terrible." "Hello to you too." She set a bag on my kitchen table. "I brought your mail. It was getting delivered to your old office at the university. I guess they never updated the forwarding address after you retired." She pulled out a stack of letters, mostly junk, but 3 envelopes made my heart stop. They were from Sarah, handwritten, addressed to me at the university, postmarked months ago, November, December, and January. All returned to sender with bright red stamps, no longer at this address. My hands shook as I opened them. Helen stood nearby, watching with concern. The first letter was dated early November, just a few weeks before Christmas. Sarah's handwriting covered 3 pages. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she felt like we'd drifted apart since Mom died. She asked why I'd stopped sending her cards or calling as often. She wondered if she'd done something wrong. The letter was full of hurt and confusion, but also love. She signed it, "Your Sarah," like she always had. The second letter, from mid-December, was shorter and more desperate. She wrote that Derek had told her I was dealing with health problems and didn't want to worry her, but she needed to know I was okay. She needed to talk to me. She left her cell number, which I'd been calling for months, and asked me to please call her. The third letter was different. It was dated early January, right after Christmas. Sarah wrote that she'd found some paperwork in Derek's office that confused her. Financial documents with names she didn't recognize, bank accounts she'd never seen. She'd asked Derek about it and he'd gotten angry, told her it was business and she should stay out of it. She wrote, Dad, I think something is wrong. I don't know who to talk to. I'm scared to ask Derek because he gets so defensive. Can you call me? I really need your advice. That letter was dated the same week Derek had called me about the investment opportunity. The same week he'd been setting his trap while Sarah was discovering his lies. I looked up at Helen, my vision blurred with tears. He kept these from me. Derek intercepted them. Sarah was trying to reach me all along. Helen sat down across from me, her face serious. Courtney, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have told you months ago, but I didn't make the connection until recently. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. It was a screenshot of Derek's social media profile, the one where he used Sarah's last name instead of his own. I knew I'd seen him before. It was bothering me for weeks. Then I remembered. He was a student at the university, briefly, about 15 years ago. What? He was in the business school. Only lasted one semester. He was expelled for an ethics violation. Something about forging a professor's signature on a recommendation letter. Back then, he went by Derek Thornton, not Derek Thompson. Same person, though. I checked the records. Derek had a history of forgery, of deception, of changing his name and moving on when things got hot, and I'd never thought to check. I'd been so focused on reconnecting with Sarah that I'd never looked into the man she'd married. I need to find out more, I said. I need evidence. Helen nodded slowly. I know someone who might help. A private investigator, used to be campus security. His name is Jack Foster. He's good, and he's discreet. I used the last of my accessible savings to hire Jack. It felt reckless, pouring more money into this nightmare, but I was past the point of caution. Within 3 days, Jack called me with his initial findings. Derek Thompson, also known as Derek Thornton, also known as Derek Thomas, had left a trail of victims across 5 states over the past 12 years. He'd run real estate scams, investment frauds, and business cons. He typically targeted older investors, people with retirement savings and not enough tech savvy to thoroughly vet his operations. He'd been arrested twice, but never convicted. Both times, he'd fled before trial and reinvented himself somewhere else. The information was damning. It was also terrifying, because it meant my daughter was married to someone genuinely dangerous, someone who'd made a career out of manipulation and theft. There's more, Jack said. He's got outstanding warrants in 2 states, one in Florida for securities fraud, one in Maryland for theft by deception. If he could be arrested in North Carolina, they could extradite him. Can you share this with the police there? Already did. There's a detective who's been building a case against him. Actually, Detective Angela Wright. She's got 3 other complaints from North Carolina victims. She just needs enough evidence to make an arrest stick. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. What can I do? Sit tight. Let the detective do her work. If you contact Derek or Sarah right now, it'll tip him off. He'll run again, and we'll lose him. I wanted to argue. I wanted to drive to North Carolina immediately and drag Sarah away from him. But I forced myself to be patient. Marie always said I had the patience of a stone when it mattered. I needed that patience now. 2 days later, I got another call. This time, from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah. I can't talk long. Derek's at a meeting. I found your number in an old phone book. She was crying. I could hear it. Dad, I'm so sorry. I found your letters, the ones I sent to the university. They were in Derek's briefcase, all opened. He read them. He never told me they came back. It's okay, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. I've been so stupid. There's money missing from our accounts. I found paperwork for businesses I never heard of. He's been lying about everything, hasn't he? Yes. I tried to leave twice. I packed a bag and was going to come home. Both times he found out and he said he'd hurt you if I left. He said he'd make sure you lost everything, that he'd ruin your name. I stayed because I was afraid for you. My heart broke all over again. Sarah, I'm fine. You need to worry about yourself and the baby. I don't know what to do. I wanted to tell her to leave right then, to walk out and never look back. But I thought about what Jack had said, about the detective building a case. Can you hang on just a little longer? There are people trying to help. Police who know what Derek is. How long? I don't know. Days, maybe a week. Can you stay safe that long? She hesitated. I think so. He doesn't hurt me, if that's what you're worried about. He just controls everything. Where I go, who I talk to, how I spend money. I'm like a prisoner. Listen to me very carefully. I'm going to give you a number. It's a detective in North Carolina who's investigating Derek. If anything happens, if you feel unsafe for even a second, you call her. Promise me. I promise. I gave her Detective Wright's number and made her repeat it back to me. Then I heard a door slam in the background and Sarah gasped. He's home. I have to go. I love you, Sarah. I love you too, Dad. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my whole body trembling, knowing that my daughter was trapped and there was nothing I could immediately do about it. But at least now, she knew the truth. At least now we were on the same side. Detective Angela Wright called me on a Wednesday morning, her voice brisk and professional. Mr. Thompson, we're ready to move on Derek. We've got enough evidence for an arrest warrant. Multiple counts of fraud, theft by deception, and forgery. When we bring him in, it's going to happen fast. I need you to be ready. Ready for what? Your daughter. She's going to need support. We've coordinated with local victim services, but family is better. Can you get to North Carolina? I was already pulling out my suitcase. I can be there in 6 hours. Make it 5 if you can. We're executing the warrant this afternoon at 3 o'clock. We're setting up a sting. Derek's meeting with potential investors at a coffee shop downtown. We'll take him there, away from your daughter. She'll be at home. I'll have an officer bring her to a safe location where you can meet her. Everything moved fast after that. I threw clothes in a bag, called Dorothy to watch the house, and hit the road. Helen insisted on coming with me, said I shouldn't be alone for this. We drove through Virginia and into North Carolina, following the GPS to an address Detective Wright had texted me. It was a hotel conference room, neutral territory. A victim advocate was there, a kind-faced woman named Susan, who explained what would happen next. Derek would be arrested. Sarah would be brought here. She'd be upset, likely in shock, and I needed to be calm and supportive. At 2:45, my phone rang. It was Jack Foster, the investigator. Courtney, we have a problem. Derek's not at the coffee shop. He got spooked somehow and didn't show up. What does that mean? It means he knows something's wrong. Detective Wright is heading to your daughter's house now, but we need to assume Derek's going to run. And if he runs, he might try to take Sarah with him. Helen grabbed my arm. We should go there. To the house. Susan tried to stop us, said to let the police handle it, but I was already moving. We got back in the car and followed the GPS to Sarah's address, a modest townhouse in a subdivision 20 minutes away. Detective Wright's unmarked car was already there, along with 2 patrol units. As we pulled up, the front door of the townhouse flew open and Derek emerged, dragging Sarah by the arm. She was fighting him, trying to pull away, but he was stronger and desperate. He practically threw her toward a car parked in the driveway. I didn't think. I just reacted. I jumped out of Helen's car and ran across the lawn. Sarah, Derek saw me, and his face twisted with rage. He shoved Sarah toward the passenger side and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. I put myself in front of the car. It was insane. It was reckless. But I looked through the windshield at Derek's face, and I thought about everything he'd taken from me. My money, my daughter, my peace, my health. And I thought about what he was trying to take now. My grandchild, my future. And I stood there, feet planted, hands on the hood. Move, Derek screamed. Let her go. Sarah was crying in the passenger seat, her hands on the dashboard. Dad, get out of the way. Derek revved the engine. For a second, I genuinely thought he might do it, might actually try to run me down. I saw his hands tighten on the wheel, saw him make the calculation. Then police officers were everywhere, guns drawn, shouting commands. Derek's hands went up. The car door opened and he was pulled out, thrown to the ground, handcuffed. He was screaming the whole time. a stream of profanity and threats. And then, bizarrely, he switched to French. He started yelling in French, the words tumbling over each other. Something about how this was all a misunderstanding, how I'd set him up, how I was the real criminal. I walked around the car to where Sarah sat frozen in the passenger seat. I opened her door, and she fell into my arms, sobbing. I held her like I used to when she was small and had nightmares. One hand on her back, one on her head, whispering that it was okay, that I had her, that she was safe now. Over her shoulder, I watched the police load Derek into their car. He was still yelling, still spewing poison. As they pushed his head down to get him into the back seat, he looked right at me and shouted one last thing in French. "You'll regret this, old man. You have no idea what you've done." I held my daughter a little tighter and replied, also in French, loud enough for him to hear, "I know exactly what I've done. I've protected my family. You should have learned better than to underestimate an old man who has everything to fight for." His face went pale. The door slammed shut, muffling whatever he tried to say next. The police car pulled away, taking Derek Thompson, or whatever his real name was, out of our lives. Sarah pulled back to look at me, her face streaked with tears. "Dad, I'm so sorry. For everything. For not believing you. For staying with him." "Shh, none of that matters now. You're safe. That's all that matters." Detective Wright approached, her expression sympathetic. "We'll need Sarah to give a statement, but it can wait a few hours. You two should go somewhere quiet. Process everything." We ended up at a diner down the street. Sarah and me in a booth by the window, Helen giving us space at another table. Sarah ordered tea she didn't drink. I ordered coffee I couldn't taste. We just sat there, not talking, letting the reality settle in. Finally, Sarah said, "I'm having a girl." In case you were wondering, the weight of those words, the future they represented, made me smile for the first time in months. A girl. I want to name her Marie, after Mom. If that's okay with you. I couldn't speak. I just reached across the table and took my daughter's hand, and we sat there crying together, grief and relief, all mixed up into something that felt almost like healing. 3 months later, I was holding my granddaughter. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 6 ounces, born on a sunny Tuesday morning in June. Sarah had moved back home with me a week after Derek's arrest, and we'd spent those months rebuilding what had been broken. It wasn't easy. We had a lot to talk about, a lot of wounds to address. Sarah felt guilty about believing Derek's lies. I felt guilty about not seeing through him sooner. We both carried the weight of what might have happened if I'd given up, but we talked. Every day, sometimes for hours. Sarah told me about the isolation, about how Derek had slowly cut her off from everyone who loved her, how he'd monitored her phone, controlled the money, made her feel like she was crazy for questioning him. The classic signs of abuse, the therapist we found for Sarah explained. Sarah hadn't even realized she was in an abusive marriage until she was out of it. Derek's trial was set for September. The prosecutors were confident. They had 17 victims willing to testify, including me. They had financial records, forged documents, and a pattern of behavior going back over a decade. Derek's public defender was already talking about a plea deal. Sarah didn't want to think about Derek anymore. She wanted to focus on the future, on her daughter, on rebuilding her life. She'd gone back to work part-time at the marketing firm, but they were flexible with her schedule. She was seeing the therapist twice a week. She was healing. So was I. My blood pressure was back to normal. I was sleeping through the night. Dorothy's casseroles actually tasted good again. Helen came over every Sunday for dinner, and Sarah had reconnected with her cousin Brad and Aunt Linda and Uncle Paul. The family, fractured by Derek's manipulations, was knitting itself back together. And now, sitting in my living room with baby Marie in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around one of mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Sarah sat beside me on the couch, exhausted but glowing. "She looks like Mom," she said softly. "Around the eyes." She did. She had Marie's eyes, dark and curious even at 3 days old. I could see my late wife in this tiny new person, could see the continuation of something beautiful that I'd thought was lost. "Your mom would be so proud of you," I told Sarah, "of how strong you've been." I wasn't strong. I fell for his lies. You got out. That took incredible strength. And you protected yourself and Marie when it mattered most. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. "I thought I knew what love looked like because of you and Mom. But Derek twisted everything. He made me doubt my own instincts." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Marie sleep. Then Sarah said, "That night at Christmas, when you answered him in French, why didn't you ever tell me you spoke it?" I'd thought about this question a lot over the past few months. Your mom and I spoke French to each other. It was our private language, the language of our marriage. After she died, I couldn't bear to use it. It hurt too much. Every French word reminded me of what I'd lost. I looked down at Marie, at her perfect little face. Derek insulting me in French. That felt like a desecration, like he was trampling on something sacred. I had to respond. I had to defend that part of my life, that connection to your mother. So it wasn't about showing him up. No, it was about honoring her memory, about not letting someone cruel and petty diminish what we had. I paused, though I'll admit, the look on his face was satisfying. Sarah laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in months. I bet it was. The doorbell rang, and Sarah went to answer it. It was Linda and Paul, coming to meet their great niece. They came in with flowers and gifts and apologies, still trying to make up for believing Derek's lies about me. I'd forgiven them, but they were taking longer to forgive themselves. We spent the afternoon passing baby Marie around, everyone taking turns holding her, cooing at her, promising to spoil her rotten. Helen arrived with dinner, a huge pot of her famous pozole, and we ate together around my dining room table, the table where all of this had started that terrible Christmas. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, I found myself alone in the kitchen with baby Marie while Sarah walked Helen to her car. Marie was awake, looking up at me with those dark, serious eyes. I spoke to her softly in French, the way Marie and I used to talk to Sarah when she was a baby. "Welcome to the world, little one. Your grandmother would have loved you so much. She would have taught you to be strong and kind and brave. She would have read you stories and baked you cookies and loved you with her whole heart." My voice cracked. "I'll try to do all those things for her. I'll tell you about her every day so you know where you came from." Baby Marie made a small sound, something between a coo and a sigh, and I chose to believe she understood. Sarah came back in and found us like that, me whispering to Marie in French, both of us crying just a little. She didn't say anything, just came and put her arms around both of us, and we stood there in my kitchen, 3 generations, holding each other. Later, after I'd helped Sarah get settled in her old bedroom with Marie and a bassinet beside her, I sat on my porch in the warm evening air. Lightning bugs danced across the lawn. Somewhere down the street, someone was having a barbecue, and the smell of grilling meat drifted on the breeze. I thought about everything that had happened, about Derek's casual cruelty that Christmas night, about how standing up for myself had triggered a cascade of terrible events, about how I'd lost money and health and time, but ultimately gained something more important. I'd gained my daughter back. I'd gained a grandchild. I'd gained the understanding that some fights are worth having, even when the cost seems unbearable. Languages can build bridges or reveal truths. That night, French had done both. It had revealed Derek's true nature and given me the strength to fight back. And maybe, in some small way, it had allowed Marie to be with us again, her language living on in her granddaughter's name. I'd learned that defending yourself isn't about pride or ego. It's about self-respect, about drawing a line and saying, "This far and no further." Derek had counted on me being too old, too tired, too defeated to fight back. He'd underestimated what a parent will do to protect their child, even when that child is grown, even when the path forward is dark and uncertain. I'd also learned about asking for help. Helen, Jack, Detective Wright, Susan, all the people who'd stepped in when I needed them most. I'd spent too many months trying to handle everything alone, thinking that's what strength looked like. Real strength, I'd learned, is knowing when you can't do it alone and being brave enough to reach out. The porch light flickered on, and Sarah appeared in the doorway with Marie. She's fussy. I think she wants her grandpa. I took my granddaughter in my arms and settled back into the chair. Sarah sat on the porch steps, and we watched the lightning bugs together in comfortable silence. "Dad," Sarah said eventually, "thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," I said. "Not ever," and I meant it. Through all the darkness, through all the pain and betrayal and loss, I'd never stopped fighting for her. That's what family does. That's what love requires. You show up. You stand your ground. You speak the truth, whatever language it comes in. Baby Marie stirred in my arms, and I held her a little closer. This little girl would grow up knowing she was loved, knowing she was protected, knowing that her grandfather had fought to make sure she came into a safe world. That was a legacy worth building. That was a story worth telling. The evening deepened into night, and I sat there on my porch with my family, finally at peace, finally home. Now I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where standing up for yourself, even in a small way, changed everything that came after? Maybe it was speaking up when someone disrespected you, or finally setting a boundary with someone who kept crossing lines. How did it turn out? Did it get worse before it got better, or did people respect you more immediately? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your voice. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or gave you hope for your own situation, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling to stand up for themselves or fighting to protect someone they love. Your share might be exactly what they need today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you remember that it's never too late to fight for what matters. It's never too late to speak your truth, and it's never too late to find your way home. Take care of yourselves and each other.